Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Ducksy Gaming. Now, as promised, this is my guide for my Barbarian tank Sentinal. Now, this is a fairly new role for me. I've only started playing it in the last couple of weeks, and I made this build and guide 100% from scratch, so there may be better ways to build it, but I've had loads of fun with it, and at times you're almost indestructible. So before we get on to the build, I just want to go through a couple of powers or feats that don't work, because you might look at the build and wonder why I'm not running them. So if we start with Come and Get It, which is here, which is threaten nearby enemies, placing yourself at the top of the list and then draw them in as an added effect. Now the drawing works, but the threaten enemies and place yourself at the top of the threat list is really hit and miss. And the majority of the time for me, anyway, it doesn't do anything. So it's one I used to slot and then realised actually I'm not getting much out of it, so I'm better off slotting something that does some damage. And the other thing I've noticed that doesn't work is Blood Fury, which if worked, it would be really good. So what this does is there is a feat, or it's a power, sorry, which is the last one you pick up, called Primal Fury, which deals physical damage to nearby enemies. Magnitude decreases as remaining stamina increases. So basically, the more stamina you've got, the less damage it deals. It's 600 magnitude, but that is when you're totally out of stamina, and it has an added effect of increased threat. The issue with this is it costs 40 rage, which is almost half of our meter. So if we go back to this feat, Blood Fury, what it's meant to do is make the cost of Primal Fury 0 when you're unstoppable, but it doesn't. Like you can't hit it when you get under 40 rage, even when you're unstoppable. And what this does when you slot this feat and you use Primal Fury, it immediately takes you out of unstoppable. So you have to have more than 40 rage left to activate it anyway. And when you do it, you're going to be removed from unstoppable. So it's a totally pointless and unworkable feat. That's just what I wanted to go through. We'll get to the powers later on. But we start with the character. As you can see, even on my last few videos, I've said I don't do Dragonborn. I wanted to squeeze every bit I could out of this character. So I have gone Dragonborn for this toon. Really, any are viable. It's whatever you like the look of. They make small differences to racial bonuses. Now, in terms of stats, this build, which you'll realise later, relies massively on hit points. So we've gone Strength and Constitution. So it's Stamina Regen and Physical Damage, which are both really good for a tank, and AP Gain and Maximum Hit Points, which again are decent for a tank. So if we go on to the actual gear, not running anything special. I've tried this with this gear, and I've also tried it with the DPS gear, like the old Hunt gear and the Demogorgon stuff. You do slightly more damage, obviously, with the other gear, but you take a massive hit to your hit point amount, and that's really important on this build, which I'll come to later. So, bog standard Helm of the Spies Guild from the Seal Store, Girder's Defense from your Master Expeditions, Fan Braces of the Spies Guild, again, Seal Store. Running Gertank's booties just because I haven't found anything better really boot-wise at the moment on this character. These are again from Master Expeditions. Now, these sound like they might not be great on a tank. Ebony Stained Shirt and Ebony Stained Trousers. Basically, whenever you're above 75% stamina, you get 3% increased damage and 3% reduced damage taken. But as you'll see, when I get onto some demonstrations of this build, we have over 75% of our stamina nearly all of the time. In terms of your artifact set and gear, you want to be running the new sets and pick whatever ones you need the stats for. The reason we're running them is just because of the big boost you get to hit points. And then again, same with the artifacts, run whatever new ones you can afford to run because you get boosts in power on most of them. Now, you could use these because we're going to need to cap certain stats to make this build effective, which I'll come on to. So you might want to pick your artifacts to do that if you're a slightly lower level. And for rings, I've got one Ebonized Assault ring for the 3% melee damage. And then I'm also running Ring of the Undead Slayer +5, mainly because it's 2 offensive slots and it gives us crit avoidance and deflection, which are stats that I wanted to add. Crit avoidance, not massively important. Deflection is vital for this build. In terms of your weapons, best in slot if you're running endgame content is going to be Burnished, because you're going to be taking lots of damage and you're going to build up that percentage power boost pretty quickly. Other than that, Alabaster and Watcher are fine too. You just want to make sure you can get one of these endgame sets because they add a lot more damage and that really adds to how much damage we can do and how much aggro we can keep hold of. Armor enchantment, I'm running Blood Theft, but I'll be honest, I don't need it and it doesn't proc that often. We don't really need an armor kit. I guess Bark Shield would be best as some extra defense, but you pick whatever you want really. I wouldn't go spending too much money on them for this build. Put all your money into your weapon enchant because a Vorpal is really important because again, we need to do as much damage as possible to make sure we maintain threat. In terms of armor kits, you want to be running power on all of your pieces here. And then for your jewelry, it's whatever stats you need. I haven't got them on most of mine. I haven't added them yet. I think I've got one combat advantage kit on this, but that was from putting it on a long time ago before it was even combat advantage. So if we move on to boons, I'll run through what I've gone. I don't have all my boons yet on this character. I'm still working on them. But first row is hit points and power. Second row is power, hit points, and movement speed. Third row is power, hit points, and companion influence. Companion influence doesn't do a massive amount, but because we get it across the board, it's way better than adding one individual stat. Then again, we're going up to power and hit points. If you're struggling to cap things like deflect and defense, which are vital, then by all means take them for now and you can respec later. For our tier 5 boons, I'm taking incoming healing, and then I'm taking crit severity. And then for the master boons, enhanced application definitely works best for this build. So basically, on at will, when you have health is below 30%, which isn't that often to be honest, this is more of a backup, then you get a self-heal added to your attack, or you apply a heal over time. I mean, there's other ones you can take. They don't really do a lot. You could take retaliation if you wanted to do a bit more damage. But I like that one because it's kind of a help me if I do ever take a huge hit and I'm down to 30%, then we've got a few heals to help us get back up. In terms of the guild boons, I'm running power, I'm running hit points, and then I'm running mount speed. You could, if your guild has got them, run deflect if you need to get that cap up, but 32k hit points adds a lot to this build, which again we'll come on to later. So the only other thing to go through in regards to sort of the character loadout and the gear is potions and consumables. Now, we don't need to do a huge amount of damage to hold aggro, which I'll come to later. If your power is low, like 100, 110, 120, you might want to use Watermelon Sorbet to get some more power. But I concentrate more on the healing side. So I add hit points, which is crazy. It also adds to our deflect chance. So if we're a little bit short of deflect, this is a good way to get that back up again. If I run an elixir, it's Corellian's Blood, which is damage and power boost. Not a huge amount. It adds about 400 power, and then as you hit enemies, it stacks up more. You can get about 1200 extra power. And then it also says it gives you a damage buff in the description, but I don't know. I haven't seen it and I haven't tested it. And then if you want to run potions, again, take whatever potion you need to top up your stats. I take power, and I don't run stronghold food just because for me it's too expensive and it's not needed. So that goes through the character's gear, enchantments, boons. When we come back, we'll go on to the mounts and the companions. So before we move on to the mounts and the companions, I've realised I totally forgot to talk through enchantments, which on this build are really important. So we'll start with the utility ones, because these are more important than all your other enchantments, and it will be explained later in the build why. Tactical enchants are what you want to be running. As you know, these give a really good incoming healing boost. Really, it's only fair that we run these anyway, because if we're stacking HP and we're going to look to push towards 550, 600,000 hit points, some healers are going to need all the help they can get, so it's only fair that we slot these enchantments to give a boost to that healing. Now, for your defense, you basically, in terms of stats, you need to cap accuracy, armor pen, crit strike, deflect, and defense. So in your defensive ones, slot whatever you need to get defense and deflect capped or as near to cap as possible. And then for offense, with all the gear that you're running, you should be able to cap accuracy, armor pen, and crit on their own anyway. So I stack power in all my offensive ones. So we'll move over to companions. Now, there's a few different ways you can go about this depending on what stats you need and what you value more importantly. So first things first, as with any build on any character at the moment, you need or want to be aiming for a legendary augment pet. I'm running Bullet Pup for the increase in power and combat advantage, just because I've capped the other stats that I need to without it. If you're struggling to cap certain stats, you might want to look at different augments that give you a boost to that. Equipment, nothing special. I'm just running the 3 items that you get through leveling up through Undermountain with rank 15 bonding runestones. And then because these all have offensive slots, the only one I can really slot is empowered because I'm over cap on all the other offensive stats anyway. Now on my enhancement, I'm running Redemption, which is a chance on hit to heal you and your companion for 4% max health over 15 seconds. It's up pretty much all the time when you're fighting. I've noticed it's not a huge amount. It's between 3,000 to 4,000 hit points per tick, but it's better than nothing. And I don't need increases to any other stats. This gives me the best benefit. Now, in terms of companions, I'm running ones that you probably haven't seen people run that much. So we're running Dragon's Insight for extra income and healing and extra hit points. Running Deep Crow for the 8k power. I think in here we need to slot something that gives us power because we do lack it a little bit in this build. I think the Tamed Velociraptor is probably the best because I think it gives you 10k when you're in a group. I don't know if it's still glitched. It did give you 10k anyway, regardless of whether you're in a group. So if you have that, that would be slightly better than the Deep Crow. We're running Mighty Insight, which is deflection and power. Goat's Instincts, again, deflection and hit points. This is because I needed the buff to get my deflection stats up. And then in utility, we're running Shadow Demon, which is amazing. I've never even seen or looked at this companion before. It was only yesterday when I was looking around on Rayna's Pocket Wiki that I saw that there's a companion that apparently does, basically every time you deflect an attack, it does literally no damage. And it does. It does 1, 2, 3 damage when it should do, if it's from a big boss at an endgame dungeon, they might hit you for 300,000. That every time you deflect is turned into about 3 damage. The good thing about this is, because we build rage by taking damage, looking at from my testing that I've done, the rage that you build is based on the initial hit before your damage mitigation comes in and before your deflect comes in. It's based on how big that initial attack is, because I've had like 10% of my rage bar filled when I've taken one of these attacks that does 3 damage. So it's definitely not based on the final figure. I think it's based on the start damage. Now, you don't have to run these. You might have other ways to cap deflect, so you can put other things in like hit points and power. But for me, this combination works really well. It gives a bit of extra income and healing. We can put in a hit points here and there because we've dropped the Energon, which I would normally run in utility. Still can take a few of these to legendary if I want to, but I don't feel I really need to at this point. Now, mounts is where it starts to get a bit complicated. In terms of, we'll start with the easy stuff. The mount you want to run, if you've got it, is the Triceratops, because it's 50k hit points as its equip power. If you don't, I'd still recommend getting a hit point mount. There's quite a few out there that give you 25k, and they're pretty cheap. Combat power, if you have, either Bat Swarm, T-Rex, Tensor's Disc, they're all really good. But if you have a legendary mount, just slot whatever combat power you can. I mean, I think if you've got 3 or 4 legendary mounts, you probably know what you're doing, so you don't need me to tell you what combat power to slot. So now is where the kind of explanation starts and the build starts to come together a little bit, and that's in the Insignia bonuses. Now, I know before people start typing in the comments that these, you get very high diminishing returns from stacking the same one twice, but with what they've done to Insignia bonuses, most of them don't really benefit us at all, and certainly not as much as an increase in healing. So we're running 3 Survivor's Blessings, which basically with them all stacked up, it's 9,200 hit points per second that we gain when we deflect an attack. I haven't got my Consumables slotted, which I always will, because these Caprazes are picked up 99 for 800 AD. So we'll just slot that one. We won't bother with the others for now. And we'll go back to our mount screen. So it's 9683. Oh, I already have one on anyway. So it's 9683, but this is before incoming healing. And then if we look at our stats for incoming healing, it's 76%. So basically that's going to get times by 1.76. So I've actually had a run through solo in Lair of the Mad Mage for the first few bits to figure out exactly what stuff does, and I can come to the stats in a moment, but there will be some gameplay later on to show you. Oppressor's Reprieve, which is whenever you're stunned, knocked, or rooted, you're healed for 5% of your hit points over 5 seconds. And at endgame content, this happens constantly. Nearly every hit that an enemy was doing on me, this was proccing. Then again, we've got the 2 Survivor's Blessings. And then lastly, this is a really, really good one as well, because we're attacking a lot in this build. We don't ever block with this build. So Barbarian's Revelry, whenever you perform a critical strike, you're healed for 1% of your maximum hit points. And that works really, really well. So there's a couple of things I want to go through first before we go through what this healing means. And that's that I know there are a few mount bonuses that you can do that just have 2 insignias, but they don't do as described, and some of them don't work at all. So if we look at Barbarian's Delight, this is exactly the same description as Barbarian's Revelry. On critical strike, you are healed for 1% of your maximum hit points. Now the problem with this is, because it does exactly the same thing, it's actually the same power. I've slotted one, then took it off, slotted the other, and it never says Barbarian's Delight. It always says Barbarian's Revelry. So if you put these two together, you don't actually gain anything because one overwrites the other. No matter what setup you run, whether it's this 3 insignia one or this 2, you'll get the 1 proc and that's it. If we then look at Survivor's Gift, the description for this is just wrong. So whenever you deflect an attack, you're healed for 1.5% of your maximum hit points instead of 1. No, it doesn't work. I know I've got 3 stacked, but if I don't have 3 stacked, it's about 4.5, 5k. Survivor's Gift doesn't give you a figure, which is worrying to start with, but I've tested it and it's less than 2,000. Now, it could be that this is actually correct, because if you look at Survivor's Blessing, it's whenever you deflect an attack, you're healed for 1% of your maximum hit points over 5 seconds. So that suggests that if we split that 1% over 5 seconds, it's 0.2% of my hit points per second. Yet, I know as I've stacked a few together, but this is normally about 5,000 base, I'm getting 5,000 a second. It should be 5,000 over 5 seconds, which would make it 1,000 a second. So it could be that Survivor's Gift is working. It's just the fact that Survivor's Blessing is broke. I'm hoping to never fix it because it's awesome. And because of that, there's not actually much difference between us slotting Survivor's Gift or a 3rd Survivor's Blessing. We do gain a tiny bit more from Survivor's Gift. I think it's about 100, but we can slot the extra insignia if we use Survivor's Blessing. So let's just unslot these and go and get my original mount back. As I say, all these together, I'll just run through what they do now. This is without Blood Theft, and this is without any kind of Cleric or Warlock or Pally helping heal me. Barbarian's Revelry hits for just short of 10k every single time I do a critical strike. It's 1 per second, but with our at-wills, they only hit about every second anyway. So basically, every time you land a crit strike, you're going to heal yourself for 10,000 hit points. Survivor's Blessing, when I add my incoming healing on, does just over 17,000. Redemption, which is our companion power, down here, does 3,300. And then we've got Oppressor's Reprieve, which sounds like it shouldn't proc that often, but literally nearly every time you get hit, this procs, and that procs are just short of 10,000. So basically total, and this is without blocking, I gain 40,000 hit points per second if I'm constantly hitting someone. Because you crit 50% of the time. I think Sure Strike is about 0.8 seconds for a hit, and it's even quicker when you're unstoppable. Oh no, so it's 0.45 seconds. So yeah, we should be every second receiving that 9,000 to 10,000 heal. So in total, we get 40,000 incoming heal. We've then also got our block to fall back on. So if we look at our hit points, with 550k just over with Caprese, and your shield is half of what your health is. So that's another 275k shield, which we can rely on if we need to. But really, I barely need to. The only time I put my shield up that I've needed to so far in the game is Raznisi when he starts getting charged up, and Trobriand can do damage, and if the healer runs out of juice, then I'll start putting my shield up. But the way we do our rotations means we really don't have to, which I'll come on to a bit later. But that covers off the mounts and what I use. I know it's totally different to what a lot of people use, but honestly, try it, it works. And I'll show you the footage later to back it up. So this is just a quick addition that's actually been made after the video, but I didn't have time to record the mount section because I've got cats whinging in the background, I've got chavs shouting outside, and I keep having to redo the recordings. It's just a quick note, so I've actually switched my mount insignia slightly. We actually get much better benefit from starting a second Barbarian's Revelry than a third Survivor's Blessing. So where Barbarian's Revelry was hitting for about 9.3 to 9.7, that's actually now hitting for about 15k. So that adds probably 3k to our heal over time, so that takes it up to about 43,000. So what you're looking at on the screen now is what I would look for your final mount. Unfortunately, they are quite expensive, the mounts that require these insignia bonuses. If you just go onto the Neverwinter website, it gives you a list of insignia bonuses. You can click on the bonus and it will then tell you what mounts those bonuses apply to. But they can end up being quite expensive. But I just wanted to add this little addition in before we move on to the next part of the video. So I'm now going to run through powers, rotations and feats and explain kind of why I use what I do and how it synergizes. First thing I'll say is feats in general are rubbish, same as the Barbarian Blademaster. Most of them are for powers and encounters that we're never going to use. So this first two being an example, Frustrating Slash gives Sentinel Slash extra threat generation for 10 seconds, but it's the at-will that takes 2.8 seconds to cast fully. And then Mighty Leap increases threat generation. We don't use either of those powers. Sure Strike adds magnitude to Bound and Slam. We don't use Bound and Slam. Indomitable Might adds 200 magnitude damage to Indomitable Battle Strike, and we do use that. And basically, the higher hit points the enemy has, the more of this extra magnitude you get. So the next ones are, this one can be handy on a boss. It's basically when you're unstoppable and you use takedown, the target takes 10% more damage from physical attacks, but it's just physical attack. So if you've got wizards and warlocks, they're not going to do any extra damage. So I slot on the move because I use Not So Fast, and it increases movement speed of me and allies by 20% for 4 seconds. So not amazing, but it is a boost at least that we can use. The next lot are focused around dailies. We do slot Savage Advance for in the mob encounters because we don't need anything else. So Savage Advance no longer knocks back enemies, but reduces a target's damage dealt by 5%. So basically just doesn't knock the enemy over. And then the other one is for Primal Instinct that we don't use. And then the last lot of feats, as I said, are both bugged. One relies on Come and Get It, which, as I said, the threat generation doesn't seem to work. And the other one relies on Primal Fury, which is broken. So honestly, pick whatever one you want because it won't be used. In terms of class features, we use Trample the Fallen. So basically, whenever you use a power of a control effect, your damage is increased by 5% for 10 seconds. And you deal an additional 10% damage to enemies who are controlled. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean by you either. So if you've got other classes that control enemies, you'll do more damage to them. If you've used a control power as well, then it's a 15% damage increase against those enemies. And then Threatening Presence just increases our threat generation. Now for dailies, as I say, I use Savage Advance when I'm just running through mobs, because it's the hardest hitting encounter that we have. And then I use Battle High at bosses. It basically increases our hit points for 10 seconds by 35%. Because of that, that then boosts up all that percentage healing that we get from our insignia bonuses. So I'll move on to the powers. We use Sure Strike as our main at will for dealing damage. And we use Challenger Slash to generate threat and to try and pull threat back if we lose it. So the magnitude is really low, but when I've tested this through dungeons, it actually has a really big effect on the threat. Like I've managed to pull back threat from DPS with just using this in a couple of swipes and it's got it back. So we'll go on to the encounters. I am looking to take advantage of that Trample the Fallen. So I'll use Not So Fast because it's AoE, so it applies a effect to all the enemies around you for 6 seconds, which means they take 10% more damage from you, and you get the extra 5% damage because you've used a control power. So that works really well as an opener. We use Indomitable Battle Strike. On our first rotation, we'll be using it to build up rage, but after that, we're going to be using it once we're unstoppable. And then the last one we use is Punishing Charge. But there's 3 reasons this encounter is one that we have to slot. First is the magnitude is really good. Second is the range is 60 feet and it charges us towards an enemy, so we can make sure we get there before any really keen DPS. And it has an added effect of stun, which means it's a control power, so we get that 5% boost, and for 3 seconds that enemy takes another 10% more damage from us. So an encounter a rotation which I'll go through in a minute is normally Punishing Charge to get to the enemies, then I'll use Not So Fast, then I'll chuck my Doohickey, Artifact, Mount Power when we've got that additional bonus. I'll be getting hit at the same time, and I'll then either use this if there's enemies that still need killing. You'll have enough rage to go into Unstoppable, but look at what health the enemies have got. Is it worth using it there, or do you just wait, hold aggro, and use it on the next mobs? If you haven't used it, then it means that when you use your Punishing Charge onto the next mob, you can then go Unstoppable and then repeat the same process before. Because we want to keep up the Trample the Fallen, once you've got your Unstoppable active, use Punishing Charge and then wait 10 seconds before you use Not So Fast, because then you can keep restacking that boost and you always get that 5% damage. Indomitable Battle Strike you want to use as soon as you go into Rage, because the more enemy a health has, the more damage it does. So I'm in Lair of the Man Mage just to test out some of the rotations. I'm going to quickly go forwards and kill this group of giants because they're not really a good example. And then we'll try and pull all of the enemies together in the next section to show A, what effect our healing has, and B, how quickly we can build up our Unstoppable. So are they going to see me straight away? Before I go and engage them, I just want to explain kind of how we look to balance our shield and our HP. Because I said we don't use our shield very much in this, and we don't actually hold it up. We use our shield when we're in Unstoppable because it blocks automatically. So the way we want our rotations to work is we want to get into a group of mobs, use our encounters, start building our rage up, take some damage. It doesn't matter if we take, half of our health bar goes or 3/4 goes, because we've got some healing to help us out. And once we activate Unstoppable, the damage then switches to going onto our shield. And because we've got all these heal over times proc in, even without a healer, by the time we finish Unstoppable, we're going to be full health, but we've probably got 1/4 of our shield. We then rinse and repeat. We take damage out of our health bar, we build up that Unstoppable, and then once our shield is back and our Unstoppable is back, we activate it, and then it rinse and repeats. Our health starts building up, our shield goes down, and it just goes in a cycle. You should very rarely have to raise your sword to block. Unless you're against a really hard-hitting boss like Trobriand, you're probably going to want to every now and again raise your sword. So the other thing I want to point out before we go and fight this other group of mobs, I want to show you what this companion does that we've slotted. So if we go to, Shadow Demon's Presence, you'll see it when we take damage. So there, that one did 7 damage. So if we go to our log, if I die here, it doesn't matter. But if we go to our log and go up, I'm just trying to find what damage that actually did to us. So there we go. Blagos deals 7 damage instead of 140,000. Now, obviously, that would then be mitigated by defense, which would take it down to 70, and I would have deflected it, so that takes it down to 35. But every other attack that these enemies do to us, we're deflecting, and they're basically doing hardly any damage again. So that one did 7. So we'll take a few more hits. None of those. One of them, there we go, 3 and 2, and it's still building our rage. So I'm going to quickly kill these, and then we'll get on with the tutorial. Okay, so I've killed those giants. Yeah, it takes a while, but then I'm on my own in a level 80 dungeon without any DPS help. So I'm going to try and run through these mobs and draw them over to this other group. So we've got 6 people to hit. So I'm going to block at this point because I don't want to take loads of damage before I even get there. So we're now going to go in and then we're going to block again. Artifact. No, because it's not active. Okay. So we'll have our artifact available in a minute. So we'll pop that. Then we'll activate our mount. And then you can see we've got our unstoppable ready to go. So then we're going to use that. And as you can see, we've got 6 mobs next to us hitting us. Our shield's not going down too badly, actually. I'm just holding short strike, looking at my rage going down. Got a doohickey, so I'll throw that. And now we're back to taking damage from our health. Because we're spamming at wills, we're getting the heals from our crits. And then again, we're already back to unstoppable, so we can now forget about our health, use our unstoppable, and again, that's going to regen while our shield takes the damage. And then obviously, you're going to have DPS helping you kill these mobs. You're not going to need to take this much damage. But again, I'm not going to do anything other than sit here spamming my trigger. Again, we've now got nearly full unstoppable again, so I'll activate that. Our shield was 3/4 of the way to healing. So again, I'm not looking at the moment what I'm doing. If you then need to start getting aggro, you can use your AoE at will, and it will draw aggro back. Doesn't do a lot of damage, but it seems to have quite a high multiplier on the aggro. So again, we're back to having enough unstoppable. Our shield's getting up to a decent level. So we'll hit that and finish off this last group here. So that's why I say you don't really need to use your shield very often. There'll be times when you need to use it. There's nothing wrong with that. But you want to try and make sure that when you use your shield that you're getting back to almost full before you hit unstoppable. So these mobs probably won't take my health down enough for me to worry about it anyway, but we will go unstoppable just to get this kind of bit of the tutorial finished. So as you can see, it's all about balancing your health over your shield and making sure that when one gets low, you can utilize the other one, but whilst always maintaining an attacking mindset. So that's that first bit of LoMM cleared. Really easy. Didn't have to use a standard health. I didn't actually look at the screen much. I just held a trigger and pressed a few buttons. And it's kind of no different through most dungeons. As I say, Trobrand is the only boss that hits hard enough to warrant it, and Rasnisi in Tomb of Nine Gods sometimes does a crazily heavy attack, so you might need to put your shield up for that. So that covers that part of the video, and that pretty much covers the build in general. So I'm just going to get out of here before this Gorgon kills me or we end up in a stalemate. So that covers everything I wanted to on this video. We've gone through what race to use, we've gone through what powers are broken, what powers to use and why. We've gone through our gear, and we've gone through rotations and how to maintain aggro. Obviously, I'm quite a high level character. I'm like nearly 25k. I've got a lot of gear that maybe a lot of people don't have. So as a conclusion to the video, I'm just going to go through kind of what priority it is for you to get the most out of a Sentinel tank. And they are definitely utilizing these Insignia bonuses that we've got. Even if you haven't got decent Insignias to slot in them, these give you massive amounts of healing. So basically, you want to concentrate on, obviously, as usual, it's your armor pen, your crit, it's your normal caps, but deflect and defense are the most vital. If you can cap defense and deflect, and then you add in those Insignia bonuses, you're already going to get really, really good self-sustain. And the last thing I'll mention is this companion that we use so that we don't take any damage when we deflect. You only need it in green because leveling up in rarity just adds extra weapon damage to a deflect attack that you do that you can only do once every 30 seconds. So it's literally pointless. So I bought this for about 15,000 AD, I think, and then just slotted him into my utility slot. So it's one you can get straight away. As soon as you get your deflect up to that cap of 68k, get that Shadow Demon, slot him in your utility slot, and you're already reducing the amount of damage you take by a huge amount. Now, it was kind of a bit of a jumble build guide because it is a character I'm still getting used to myself, but I'm really enjoying it, so I wanted to release a build guide. If you need any help, or you've got any questions, or you've got any pointers where I'm, miles off the mark and I'm going wrong, then please leave questions in the comments and I'll respond to them as quickly as I can. But thank you for bearing with me through this video, and we'll see you in the next video.